Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, we'll bring you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts your school community. Plus, we will take you inside the state capitol, talk about the latest legislative hearings and all of the proposed bills that you need to keep an eye on. That more coming up on the ACSA legislative lunch break, which starts now. And it is just after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. I'm Naj Ali Khan, ACSA's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you with us today. Edgar on assignment, but we wanted to make sure we were on the air today because we've had so much going on at the state capitol involving proposed bills, involving legislative hearings. We wanted to make sure we had the latest information for you. So that's why we're here today. But go ahead and jump onto our chat and say hello. Let us know where you're watching from today. Sheldon Smith and Sunny Dunn were our very first members, very first viewers on the chat today. Great to have you. Neri Pais is on there. Stephen Hovey, Mark Campbell from Calaveras Unified, Ellen Wheeler. So good to have all of you guys with us. Thank you so much. We'll get to a couple of news headlines right off the top, and then we'll bring on our guests today, Megan Baier and Diana Vu from ACSA's Governmental Relations Department. They'll be here. They'll talk a little bit about the budget. We'll talk about transitional kindergarten. We'll talk about where the legislative process is right now as we head towards the May revision. That more coming up in just a couple of moments. First, let's get some news headlines. We want to talk about this CDE study that came out on enrollment data. It came out yesterday. Here's some of the particulars of it. Now, this is self-reported enrollment data coming in from 900 school districts, 58 county offices of education, and 1,300 charter schools. From this data, the statewide total of students is down 0.67% by more than 39,000 students from the previous year. In comparison, academic year 2021-22 shows a decline of 1.84%, and in 2020-2021, there was a 2.6% decline, and the largest decreases coming in 2nd, 8th, and 10th grade. But let's talk about some of the positive data, and perhaps some of you are seeing this in your district, and I'd be interested to have all of you comment on if you're seeing something very similar in your districts. The largest increases that we have seen coming in kindergarten, as well as 7th and 11th grades. And here's an interesting statistic. If you live in the Sacramento area, there's been a 0.6% increase. That, according to EdSource, they did an analysis of all of the data that was in this CDE study. That 0.6% increase is the largest increase in the state's 10 regions. It amounts to about 3,000 students that have enrolled here. That's an increase here in Sacramento County. And of course, that report is available over on the CDE's website. Also want to direct your attention to a story that caught our attention that was in EdSource about flooding. School districts, as they prepare for the snowpack to melt, what they're doing to protect their schools and their school communities from incoming flooding. The story indicates, again, this is from EdSource, that 1/5 of the schools in the state are, quote, in high or moderate risk for flooding. So if you have a couple of minutes, go ahead and take a look at that story. Again, really interesting, caught our attention about what so many of these districts are doing right now to protect their facilities. A lot of them right up against some of those levees that we had burst earlier in the year. So go ahead and take a look at that story. Okay, let's go ahead and let's switch right now to our main topic, which is what is happening at the state capitol and what you need to know about proposed legislation to keep on your radar. So let's go ahead and bring in our two guests today. Megan Baier, ACSA legislative advocate, and Diana Vu, ACSA legislative advocate, two of my favorite people. And I'm not just saying that because they're here on the show. I'm actually saying that because I mean it. Diana and Megan, so good to have you both here on the show. Let me just ask you right off the top, because each of you have played kind of a different role at the state capitol, whether it's been on the legislative side or the lobbying side. And put us in your shoes for a moment. And Megan, I'll have you start. For our viewers, when the legislative session is going on, when all of these hearings are going on, as we're moving our way towards the May revision, what's it like inside the state capitol for everybody that's walking around in there?
It's a super, super busy time of year. You have dozens of hearings, both policy hearings on the various bills, thousands of bills that have been proposed, in addition to budget hearings that are reviewing the governor's budget proposals. You've got hundreds of people in and out of the doors every day. So it's a really busy and chaotic time with just huge volumes of people in the Capitol right now. Yeah.
Diana, for you, what is this experience like for you when you're inside the state capitol that our members would be interested in hearing?
At a house when committee hearing starts.
Okay, I think that we're having a bit of an issue, a bit of a tech issue over there. I'm seeing mic issues. That might be with just Diana. So let's go ahead and work through that. Megan, can I just let me ask you then? Let's talk about the state's fiscal landscape. What are you hearing? What does the cycle look like right now?
Absolutely. God, I love technology, always keeping us
That's
on our
right.
toes. So right now, revenues, unfortunately, they're continuing to decline. They're coming in lower than the 2022 Budget Act estimated. So essentially, the state is most likely not going to be able to pay for all the commitments that it made. So the governor's probably going to have to scale back some of his priorities when he releases his May revision. Another kind of, piece of uncertainty that adds to this is because of the various natural disasters that have happened across the state, the vast majority of Californians living in the state were granted tax filing extensions all the way until October. So this is really amplifying the uncertainty because we don't know what kind of revenues we actually have. And the state budget is actually due in mid-June. So there's a pretty significant misalignment between when Californians are going to be required to pay their taxes and when legislators are actually going to, based on the Constitution, have to pass a budget. So some folks have remarked they feel like they're flying blind, because they really won't have a clear revenue picture. And unlike the federal budget, the state actually has to have a balanced budget. So it's going to be interesting. We'll see what they do. In the past, the legislature and the governor have used different mechanisms like trigger cuts, or they've funded programs based on triggers. So if a certain level of revenue materializes, then a program would be funded. So those are all kind of some of the things we're wondering what we're going to see, and we'll know more in the coming weeks.
That brings up a question. I had the opportunity to talk with my tax man 2 weeks ago about the tax issue and trying to figure out the budget dollars and how they have to go about kind of looking at things without actually having a fixed number. For people that are in the Department of Finance who have to kind of look at everything and then kind of move all of the puzzle pieces together, how much more difficult does this make their job? Because they don't have any actuals. It's all on estimates and projections.
It's super challenging. So, the last couple of years, we've seen huge fluctuations in revenues, right? Like the major dip in 2020, and then we had the boom in 2021 with 2022 with huge revenues. Now we have these natural disasters and we have this tax filing. So there's all these layers of uncertainty that are making it super challenging for them. And that's why, as we're kind of looking forward, I think we will see the governor make some reductions in the May revision. But I'm looking to see if they're going to kind of utilize some of those tools they've used in the past to deal with uncertainty, those trigger cuts, if the revenues don't materialize, or fund programs based on if they do, right? Because the legislature, they're going to adjourn in August. So when we actually have the revenues in October, the legislature won't be in session. So it is a logistical nightmare, to be honest, for them, big time.
When the budget came out in January, obviously, I don't think that this was something that we were looking at, but when you have to start moving things around, when you move the chess pieces around, I have to imagine the governor still wants to make sure that his priorities are nailed down in this budget, even if they're having to move some pieces around. Would that be good news? I know I'm making you bring out a crystal ball, but
Yeah.
would that be good news for public education's budget because he has been so steadfast in we're going to maintain, but we're also going to try and grow in as many ways as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good signals for us is that one, he really protected education in his January budget. So it's clear that he's prioritizing stability to his greatest extent possible. So, really appreciate that. He's been really clear that his programs that he's prioritized, TK, the expanded learning after school program, universal meals, those are going to be priorities that he's very committed to. And I would not anticipate, given where we are, even with the reductions, I would not anticipate him touching those. He's been very consistent. So, we appreciate the consistency. It's hard when things get changed around. And so we'll see. I mean, I think he's going to be looking towards, right now we have a really high statutory COLA, way over 8%. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that come down a little bit. There also is quite a large reserve, although he's been reluctant to want to touch that because of the economic forecast looking negative in the out years. So we'll see. A lot of question marks. It's going to be an interesting budget season.
Yeah, it certainly is. Diana Vu is back with us, audio corrected. At least the team behind the scenes tells me. Diana, let's talk transitional kindergarten. It's funny, we were kind of talking about TK and kindergarten before the show started. It's a big part of the budget conversation. What updates can you give us on TK?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for your patience. And I now have a fancy microphone like Naj.
There you go.
Okay, so, well, as many of you know, the governor's budget proposal included increasing the education requirement for the second adult in the classroom. So ACSA has been aggressively lobbying against this proposal and have asked the legislature to reject it. We've teamed up with other education management organizations and labor groups on this front. We also have some other advocacy efforts related to TK in the works as well. So this includes the 1-to-10 ratio change. But before anyone has a panic attack, this change is not included in this year's governor's budget proposal. Instead, we're trying to be proactive for when it does happen. We want to ensure that there's not only sufficient Prop 98 growth to continue the maintenance of the lower ratios, but also ramp up time. We are also asking for extension on the 24 early education units. We asked for this last year, but now that the deadline is approaching, I think we're starting to see some real movement with the legislature. We've heard from several members asking questions about the deadline committee hearings, on one-on-one meetings with us, and now there's a bill, AB 1555 by Quirk Silva, which extends the requirement to August 2025. So that's 2 years out. And we, of course, support this. With that said, though, I often hear pushback stating that LEAs have known for years about this requirement, but it disregards the factors that have made it increasingly difficult for educators to obtain these credits, such as the implementation of UTK and the pandemic. So we're going to continue working on this.
Dinah, let me ask you about the legislative process, where it is right now. And have we seen, because I know earlier when we had the changeover in January, we had a number of new members in the legislature. So let's talk about the legislative process, and just through your lens, have the new members had an impact, not just during hearings, but also during some of these higher level discussions about some of the bills and legislation?
Sure. So in regards to the legislative process, the legislature is a little less than halfway through the legislative process right now. They've already hit the bill introduction deadline, where we've seen like thousands of bills introduced. I mean, it's a lot. And now they're being heard in their respective policy committees. But like many of you, the legislature is actually on spring break right now, and will resume on Monday. This includes committee hearings, which will start to last for hours, as we previously mentioned, because the legislators have to get their bills out of policy committee and into appropriations committee, which is the committee that reviews all fiscal bills. If the bills survive appropriations committees, which kind of culls a lot of them. It then goes to the floor for a full vote. The bill that passes out of there then transfers to the House, where it starts the process all over again over on that side. As for the new lawmakers, from what we've seen, a lot of them have done their homework. They're doing their homework on their bills. They're asking pretty thoughtful questions in committee. And ACSA has met with quite a number of these new members. They're all very receptive to feedback and open to learning more about what they don't know. During the summer, we're going to see a change in assembly leadership, and I think this is when it starts to get really interesting. So we'll see if anything else changes along with that as well.
We're getting a number of questions, and folks, if you want to go ahead and continue to put those in the comment section, we'll go ahead and tackle some of those. In fact, we might just do it right here. Let me ask both of you. Megan, I'll have you start. Let's talk about some of the bills. What are you following, and what do our members need to know?
Well, we're following a lot. There are literally hundreds, thousands of bills. So a couple worth mentioning. There's a number of bills that failed passage last year or, in multiple years past. So one of them is a mandate bill that would require school districts to only purchase zero-emission vehicles by 2035. We have a lot of concerns about technology having the capacity to run the routes that we need. There's another bill that would improve the process by which districts can bill for Medi-Cal services. It's often called the LEA BOP program. There's a lot of challenges there, but essentially it would bring in a lot more resources to schools to provide really important student services. So we're very supportive of that one, trying to get it over the finish line. And then finally, I wanted to just mention too, there's a bill that would put a facilities bond on the 2024 ballot. This is really important. Prop 51 dollars are completely expended. Without a passage of a bond, our school facilities program will grind to a halt and there won't be any state support. So this is a really important bill for public education this year.
And Diana, what about you?
Yeah, so as Megan said, there are hundreds of bills, but a couple of them that we are really closely watching and working on. One is SB 765, which allows retired CalSTRD members to return temporarily to educator positions. This includes both classroom teaching and administrative without facing any penalties. ACSA is also sponsoring a bill by Senator Newman, which provides safeguards around superintendent dismissals without cause. And there's another bill by Assemblymember Corey Jackson, which some of you may have heard about. This would limit the school board's authority to remove instructional materials. We are working closely with the author's office and have been meeting with them consistently and hope to get to a good agreement on it.
Okay, let's go rapid fire here because we've got a bunch of them coming in. And I know that this one will make Megan happy because Megan's whole life is Proposition 28. So let me go to this question here. You knew I had to ask this one. Shoot, where did it go? Darn it. Oh, here we go. Dr. Earl's Daily Spin, which has got to be the greatest name possible in our comment section. Will the arts monies from Prop 28 being negatively affected?
Thank you for recognizing that, how much of Prop 20 consumes my life now. So yes, the Prop 28 dollars, the way the initiative was crafted is how much money is in Prop 28 is going to depend on Prop 98. So we are in what's called a test one, which all that means is that public education gets about almost 40% of whatever the general fund is. So to the extent that we have lower revenues, there will be a direct impact on Prop 28. So yeah, there and year to year, this is going to be, in good times and bad, that is going to be the challenge of Prop 28 is you're not going to know exactly how much you're going to get, and it can fluctuate pretty significantly.
Okay. Our great friend Neri Pais asks status on Senate Bill 98. That's the Portantino bill.
Sure. So that bill passed the Senate Education Committee. It is in Senator Portantino's own Appropriations Committee in the Senate awaiting a hearing. It does have a pretty big price tag. So that's kind of the challenge, especially given the revenue situation this year.
All right. I'm moving my way down here to Victor. Victor asks, has there been any update on how LEAs will be able to collect ADA? During COVID, there were talks about changing that process.
No, there isn't any update right now. I think the state wants to see kind of how attendance rebounds or doesn't. The initial data we're seeing is that attendance is up from where it was last year, but it's not back to pre-pandemic times. Fortunately, there were a couple policies that were passed last year that are going to protect your funding. So the COVID attendance relief, and then the ability to use a 3-year rolling average. It's something we're monitoring very closely, though, and if this trend continues, there may need to be some changes. So more to come.
All right, Diana, we're going to give Megan just like a 30-second break here because we have a question for you. The requirement for the 12 unit for ECE, can the adult ed schools help by providing the 12 units needed? Whom should we work with to set up curriculum towards the units?
First of all, Megan has all the fun issues. And that's an interesting question. I would say you should work with the district office because they can approve these credits as well. I have to think about this, I'm sorry, a little bit more. I guess I'm gonna have to think about this until we can get back to you on this, actually, because right now, traditionally, it's done by colleges, by 4-year colleges. But I love the idea of being kind of open and unique about trying to get these credits, because obviously it's been very difficult for a lot of people to do this. And there are other ways to do it too. And there's some flexibility. So let me actually, can you drop your email in the chat and let me just get back to you on this?
There you go. Thank you, Diana, for that one. Let me, because we've been corresponding with Gary Reller, who's over at Riverside Unified School District, home of Lamont Butler from San Diego State. He asked the question, an update on SB 274. And from what I'm reading behind the scenes here, they haven't had a hearing yet. So no update at this time. But then Gary does follow that up, Megan, and I see you shaking your head on this one. Will our members have an opportunity to testify? That actually brings up a very interesting question about member involvement, because we've got our legislative action days coming up in a week and a half. I think it's a week and a half before we have that. But what about opportunities right now to testify? If there are any hearings that are going on, I'll have both of you respond to that. But Megan, specifically on Gary's question on 274.
Absolutely. You all have the opportunity to engage whenever and however you want. Absolutely. Like, these are public hearings, so you can, if this is like an issue you're very passionate about, you absolutely can. On behalf of ACSA, we have a legislative policy committee. This bill is going to our legislative policy committee. We haven't yet taken a position. We have a meeting coming up soon. So, but in your individual capacity, absolutely. If ACSA takes a position on the bill, then we can work via the association, but we're always happy to, even if you just want to come on behalf of your district, absolutely. You always have the opportunity. These are public hearings, so, and happy to support that.
Okay, one thing that that Diana talks about all the time in this office is dashboard. Simone Charles asked this question, and this may not be relevant to the dashboard you talk about all the time here in the ACSA offices, but she asked, is there any update on the DASS dashboard for option schools?
I love that she brought this up. Dashboard does take over my life, and I love this piece of the DAS because it's something we're working very, very hard on. So right now, State Board had approved of some different options to be able to make it, to look into, to make it easier for DAS schools, which are alternative schools, on the dashboard, so they're not punished because of how just the natural natures of DAS schools are. Previously, as many of you may or may not know, they were on their own graduation rate, which was a 1-year rate. So now, because the federal government had denied California of a waiver to be able to continue to do that, we're all on the same rate, graduation rate. CDE is now looking into doing a 6 to 7 year graduation rate to see if this improves the outcomes for DAS schools. In addition, ACSA and CSBA is advocating on a federal level, in case this does not pan out for DAS schools, to continue to request for this waiver. And we're pushing our Congress members to be able to ask the Department of Education for this as well. So it's something we're working hard on. We really recognize the need for it.
You know what? Let me go back to Jeff Oakes makes mention of something, because we've talked about early childhood education. There was that question that we had earlier, and he makes mention that Merced Adult School has an early childhood education program partnership with UC Merced. So that's great to hear out of the Merced area. Let me ask Ken Silman's question here. He has there been any efforts to allow charter schools to use the same adjusted ADA rules? Presently, if he's correct, charters can't use the 3-year average. Where are we on that?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a fight that was lost last year. There were quite a few people that wanted that ability. There were other, parties in the legislature, and ultimately they decided not to disallow it. So there could be more to come on it, but that was unfortunately the outcome last year. Mm-hmm.
All right. Just to point this out, folks, Megan and Diana both wore similar colors today, and yet didn't tell me to do that, even though Megan was in my office like 90 minutes ago. She failed to tell me about that, but that's okay. I guess I didn't get to be part of the party today. So Megan Baier, Diana Vu, ACSA legislative advocates, great members of our ACSA governmental relations department. Megan and Diana, so good to have you on the show today.
Thank you. And in our defense, we tried to get you change your tie right before the show.
Look, folks, I mean, look, I couldn't get this tie on in the 60 seconds that I had and still get myself in place for this. Next time we have you guys on the show, let's all coordinate this correctly and then not tell Edgar about it at all. And then that way Edgar feels bad about it. We'll do that. Thank you guys so much for being with us today. Folks, want to tell you a couple of pieces of information. If you like what you see here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, we invite you to subscribe to us on YouTube or like us on Facebook. If you do so, you'll get updates when we're about to come on the air with any live broadcasts. And then, of course, promotions for the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Also, if you have great stories to tell from your school district, we want to tell those stories as well in EdCal. Go ahead and send your stories to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl, at mcarl@acsa.org. I want to make mention of this. There's a great story coming up in this week's edition of EdCal. It's written by a high school student. She's talking about special education educators and social and emotional wellness. So that's a story you definitely don't want to miss. Well, folks, thank you so much for being with us here on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live Wednesdays here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.